Leeds! What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My mission is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, is doing during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple crises: the global pandemic, Brexit, and of course, the ongoing and accelerating collapsing of capitalism, the state, and the climate through this decade. To do this, I need people like you, dear listener. Most of all, I need people who are in Leeds or who are from Leeds to come on this show and be my guests. So please join me and help me with this mission whenever and however you can. Critically, I will need people like you, dear listener, as financial backers. Please consider supporting or donating to this project. You can do so with a £1 monthly donation via either Patreon or Ko-fi, or you could donate any one-off amount to Working Hours via either Ko-fi or through the Libra Pay button on the About page of Western Studios website. Thank you. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, interesting. No one's ever actually asked me that, and I thought about it, and I think, truth be known, when I was little, I would have just loved to have been a footballer. And I'd never actually realised that until just speaking about it then. And I think maybe that's why I want to make sure that for my son, I enable him to participate if he wants to, in football. So, yeah, when I was younger, I did end up getting trials for Bradford City, and single parent family to a degree, so I kind of rocked up to the training on my own, and never really had someone around who was like, right, come on, let's go again, let's go back next year. So I think I want to do that a little bit for my kids.
Yeah. Okay, so you just pursued it for a tiny amount of time, just went to what you could attend, and then it kind of fell off.
Yeah, I think not having, when you're younger, you don't have a lot of that. I didn't have a lot of direction when I was younger. Yeah. I was kind of just enjoying life and getting mixed up with my mates and just interested in other stuff. I did enjoy football, and I like the idea of playing football. It's a bit of a, I want to be in Baywatch type dream. I never really took it serious, but I think in there somewhere I would have loved to.
Yeah. Did you play a lot sort of on the streets and stuff?
Yeah.
And like summer holidays were spent playing loads of football?
That's it. Yeah. All day. Football. Yeah. That's what life's for about, Get a ball, go with your mates and just play football. Yeah.
You're listening to Series 3, Episode 26, and to my guest, Kevin Pratt. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 5th of September 2022. Hello, loves. Kevin Pratt has worked successfully in property development and land acquisition, succeeding with the acquisition of a project building several townhouses in South Leeds. Then he discovered Passive Haus and began Leeds-based eco-builder Purehaus. Purehaus has a mission to build homes with reduced energy demand, allowing them to provide homes that rely on the consumption of energy through locally generated renewable sources. Their ultimate aim is to create a truly carbon zero home, one which creates more energy than it consumes during its entire life cycle. This includes the manufacturing of materials, demolition, and the recycling of its components at the end of the home's life. To find out more about Passive Haus, go to passive.de, as in Deutschland, /en, as in English. You can find Purehaus at purehaus.co.uk. Now, please enjoy this episode of Working Hours with Kevin Pratt. So what is it that you're doing now then?
Yeah, so totally different. I run a development company where we build to what's called the Passive House standard, and that's a new standard of construction, I say new. The Passive Haus Institute was founded by a chap called Wolfgang Feist. He built the first house in 1991. However, there have been building homes like this before that. For example, they did what's called the Fram, which was a Viking ship built using super insulation, thick walls, minimizing loss, which is some of the fundamentals of a passive house. So let me just explain for everybody basically what a passive house is. It's design led. So what that means is the shape of the building and the position of the building is very important. The design aspect of the building, they use a term called form factor, which is to do with the shape of the building. Mm-hmm. All these design-led principles are really important. So the south-facing windows are bigger so that they can take in the solar gains. The north-facing windows are smaller so that you're not losing heat, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So you don't have heat losses. Further to that, you have air tightness, which is very important. So a typical building regs home in today's, sort of building standards is about 10 air changes per hour. Mm-hmm. Building stock within the UK, I'm going to guess is around 15 air changes per hour because the standard has slightly increased. Passive house standard, or the standard that we aspire to build to, is no more than 1 air change per hour. In fact, it's 0.6, which is what we got on our last development. And my aim so as well as doing new build, we also are looking to get involved in managing retrofit. Mm-hmm. So the retrofit I'm going to be doing on my own personal house, I'm going to aim to have that 1 air change per hour, which is what they call NFIT standards. So at the moment, my house is 20 air changes per hour. So what that basically means is that I'm paying to heat the street. All of the heat that goes into my house goes straight out again. Mm-hmm. This concurs with my, I'm going to say layman's thinking, which is when I moved into this house, I remember saying to my wife on the first night, I wish I'd never moved here. It's a better house and it's in a better area, but I was freezing. I was surprised, but I've had all that confirmed now. Now we've done what they call an air tightness test, a blower door test. So I've discussed that it needs to be design led. I've discussed air tightness. Then it needs to be super insulated. Mm-hmm. So a typical building might have a void of, say, 100 mil filled with insulation. Mm-hmm. But what we have is about 300 mil and it's super insulated. So what we're using at our workshops, we have a zero carbon workshop, which is where we create a panelized system. So with the walls of the buildings that we produce, we have a 300 mil cavity, which is super insulated with recycled blown glass. And so if you can imagine, I'm sure you can picture some insulation from your attic. Mm-hmm. You can picture what that looks like. Mm-hmm. That's in sheets. So what we do is we blow the recycled blown glass in. So it's like little dots, shall we say, of recycled insulation, and therefore it fills all the nooks and crannies, so there's no gaps. So with a sheet of insulation, you can have big gaps all the way around it. You might have, say, for example, 100 mil cavity, but you might only have 80 mil of a sheet of insulation. So you've got what they call a convection loop, which is where you've got an air gap, and basically you're not maintaining the thermal mass in the property. It's been looped out, so to speak. That's my simplistic way of describing it, shall we say. So you've got the insulation, you've got the air tightness, you've got the design led, and then you've got the triple pane windows and triple pane doors. So basically what happens is with a typical window, it's double or maybe even single glaze. So what happens there is you have more heat loss if it's single glaze, less heat loss if it's double, and if it's triple, even less heat loss. But another factor is also the seals. So when I assessed my house, you can actually use a heat camera, a thermal camera, and see the frames, and you can see the amount of heat that is lost out of the frames. So what we do with a triple pane window, not all triple pane windows are built like this, but you have what's called an aluclad timber frame. So it has internally, it's got the timber frame element to it, and then it's cladded with aluminium, and the seals are very, very good, and the install has to be very, very well executed. So you could have an installation of a triple pane window, and you'd have a lot of heat loss around the side where the installers have installed incorrectly. So the installation, the fine details of doors and windows is really, really important. You can lose a lot of heat there. So I've gone through those, and then finally it's the MVHR. So that is what they call a mechanical ventilation heat recovery unit. So basically, what happens is you take the air from inside the house and you recirculate it, take it out of the building, and then bring in fresh, clean air, and it's filtered and heated as it comes in. And that's a very efficient way of, number one, keeping the heat in the building, but number two, removing air pollution. So I was gobsmacked when I first seen a filter. We installed an MVHR in our last development. We installed the filter, we pulled it out, and it was like black. It just that's basically what you're breathing in all day, every day. So air pollution is a bigger thing now. We're all becoming more educated on it, and it really does matter.
Well, it's like you see the Yorkshire stone, don't you, everywhere, and it's black, but then you don't always think that underneath that's just sandstone, and it shouldn't be black, but that's just from the air pollution over time.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, really, because you would never think it. I mean, I'm talking about a house that's vacant. There's nobody in the house. So, and the doors are locked. So where's all that coming from?
Just outside. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And when you start to put that into your brain and think, wow, I'm actually breathing that in. That's going to be doing me any good. So they're the principles that our company is founded around. And those are the principles that we're passionate about. And having been through the process of being a typical developer, so I started out doing development in traditional methods, and then moving over to building to a passive house standard. There's no going back for me, because I've just seen that it takes precision, it takes due diligence, it takes time and attention, detail. But it's a bit of a no-brainer for me. I really am passionate about it. I really want to drive this cause as much as I possibly can. While I'm in my youth and shall we say performing well as a business owner, then I'll be able to do that, and that's something I'm very committed to. What we've seen is that it's very much a talking point now, but there's a lack of knowledge. So we want to educate people, and then we want to supply what we're educating them about. So it's really important we take the time to go into colleges, business events, and go and educate them about what it is that we do. And then longer term, what we want to do is train people in positions of influence who can fully understand what it is that we're doing and drive it, so business owners can drive it. And we are really seeing that. We're actually, there's a bottom-up pressure. So people like Purehaus really taking action. They're taking that pressure upwards. And you've got the government pressure coming top down. And they are starting to meet in the middle. People are starting to understand now that, we have to build differently. So just some facts for your audience. So 40% of carbon emissions come from the built environment. That's massive. When you look at, if as a as a country at the moment, if our air changes about 15 on average, we've got some serious work to do to get to 1 air change per hour across the entire stock. So
Okay.
that means going back over existing work that's already done and doing it correctly. And what we can't afford to do, and one of the things I'm real passionate about is this education piece, because what we can't afford to do is go do what I would call a shallow retrofit. So a shallow retrofit is, maybe you've spoken to me, you've got a rough idea of what retrofit is about. So you go away and you do it yourself and miss out important details. So you've got good intentions, but just behind, you're lacking a little bit of education. Then what happens is we have to go back in and do that work again in 5 or 10 years' time. Because I do believe that once we start to have this performance metric, the Passive Haus is a standard that's well recognised and would champion that. Once we've got that performance metric in place, then every building will be tested. So every building has to meet the standard, and that's really what we're keen about. I mean, just some knowledge for your viewers as well. So I can't believe that this is allowed to happen, but if you build say 20 houses, you only have to test 1 or 2 of them. So if that means if you're a buyer of one of my houses and I build 20 houses, if I sell you the one that we've not tested, then the air tightness might be even worse than industry standard, which at the moment is 10 air changes per hour. We might have missed insulation out because for whatever reason, it was inconvenient, and we decided to cut a corner. And there are real examples of this. You know, I've got a picture of a house that had insulation installed on their house, but what happened is the installers thought, I can't be bothered working where these trees are. So there was a thermal image of insulation everywhere but where the tree was. Massive block. So that's not just reckless. I mean, it's nowhere near close to the standard that we want to aspire to. And this is why it's so important that we have the performance metric. I do see it as a barrier to market for the industry, because what happens is, let's say, for example, you're going to retrofit your home and it costs tens of thousands of pounds. And what we're encouraging is that after you've done your work, you then have someone come and assess it. So the only way that I personally see this being rolled out at scale is by having government funding for, number one, training, but also for assessment. So in Ireland, they have, the names just slipped me, but they have a training centre. They have 6 training centres in Ireland, and all of the training is free. And so basically what you can do is you can go and learn for free how to retrofit and how to build sustainably. And it's all sharing knowledge, all government funded. And then what happens is you're going out there and educating your customers. You know, educate your customers, and your customers take that on board, and they decide, yeah, I take on board what he's saying. I want to do a thorough job. So I think that's going to be a really strong driver. And the proof is in the pudding. So the average air change in Ireland is 2.8. So they are beating us by a long stretch. And as I understand, Scotland have got a similar setup. So they've got a unit called the Built Environment Smart Transformation. So basically, at that facility, you can get trained for free how to build environmentally conscious, how to retrofit, and that will then be getting rolled out. And you know, I'm sure that Scotland are ahead of England by a long way. I'll give you a reason why I say that. They've had 97% vote for Scotland to have Passive Haus as the standard in the country. That's 97%. So we're going to find that out before the end of the year, hopefully. If I've got my fingers crossed that Scotland do get Passive Haus passed as a law to be installed across the entire housing stock. So yeah, we need to keep up pace with the rest of the people around us. You know, many countries, Germany, where the Passive Haus Institute is founded, they are rolling out retrofit at quite a big scale.
Mhm.
It's happening. It really is happening now. People are starting to take this seriously, and we're thankful that we've got a really good team of people around us who are really committed to the education side. So, for example, we've got Jesus who has set up a company called Zero Energy in Spain, which is basically an education company which educates designers, architects, builders how to build to the Passive House standard.
Mhm.
So that's some of the experience within the team, and then we've got John who really championed having a Passive House or Passive House standard course to be rolled out across England
Mhm.
back in 2016 due to, we'll say, reasons, political reasons, that education company was not rolled out.
Mm.
So we've got John who's more or less set up a development scenario, an education scenario in England.
Mhm.
Hayes who's doing it in Spain.
Mhm.
And then we've also got Claire, who I would say probably about 8 years ago was knocking on college doors, looking to educate them. So what we've got within our team is a team of people who are really, really dedicated towards educating the built environment. And,
Mm.
this is, I'm going to say, a once in a lifetime opportunity to really affect something that's massively important
Mm.
for our children and our children's children. So,
And for us, because it's happening now,
exactly. And the reality of that, I'm not one for sitting in the sun. Yeah, I'd much prefer to.
Neither am I, surprisingly.
Yeah, well, when you've got bald head,
Yeah, well, red hair.
red hair and a bald head, it's not a good mix, is it? So, I'm not a big fan of sunbathing. So with the heat wave, I know my wife was like, "This is brilliant." I love the sun,
Mm.
but I'm thinking, wow, this is hard. This is hard to work in because it's hot, and also a reminder every single day that this is now happening faster.
Mm.
We thought it was going to happen.
Mm.
So climate change is real. It is happening.
Mm.
And if we don't get a move on, we're already too late. So, yesterday is too late, in my opinion.
Okay, well, we'll get into all of that. So I want to ask you first of all. So, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but because it's an industry term, there might be technicalities to it. So I want you to kind of take us through the air change. So, I mean, is that replacing the entire sort of store of air in the house and that's cycled out, and how many times that cycles out a day? And how does that work? Is it just a process of the ventilation in the house or in the building allows the heat to rise and to leave? Just take us through a basic sort of layman's explanation.
Kind of explain it a bit better for you. So, well, first of all, where does air leakage happen in a house?
Mm.
So it will happen, like I said before, around windows and doors, junctions. So ceiling and floor junctions, wall junctions. You'll be surprised when you start looking and thinking about it, where all the air loss is happening. So for me, I've got a suspended timber floor.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of air loss that I will get through that suspended timber floor is unreal.
Mm.
So I've got a utility space, and where they've brought all the service pipes up, the service penetrations,
Mm-hmm.
I'll lose a lot of air there.
Mm-hmm.
Loads of air going out there. So we've got strategies that we basically snug things right up to the service pipes, and then you can seal around the service pipe after you've put something in there as something to catch to, shall we say. You can then apply liquid membranes to it to make it solid, so there's no air loss. So that's the concept of air tightness. And then with the air, so basically what you have is you have intake and you have exhaust. So you have, with the MVHR, you have ducting in the ceiling, or in between the first and second floor, or the loft. A lot of my ducting will go in the loft. So you have the intake, so that'll be air coming in that's already pre-warmed and filtered. and then you'll have air that's going to get sucked out through the exhaust. So that'll get taken out. So your exhaust vents, they're in your bathrooms and your kitchen.
Mm.
And so your intakes and maybe your bedrooms and your lounge areas, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it all happens within that NVHR. And where the joint is going out of the building, that's where the filtration process happens. And I'm not an NVHR designer, so I'm going to tend to be able to explain it all in detail. But that's the basic premise of the NVHR and how it works.
Okay. And then, considering we're sat here on a nice warm September day on our record-breaking year for heat globally and locally, what about the heat transfers? Sort of, I mean, you've talked a lot about keeping heat in. What about letting heat out? What is it like for a boiling hot day? Are you just going to sweat? Is it going to be a sweat box or is it cool as well?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So what you have is you have what they're called brise-soleils, which are on the windows, which basically block out sunlight. When the sun's high, it blocks some of the sunlight out.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's a warm day and the sun's up high, you're not getting the full rays of the sun. It blocks it out.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously when it's a bit lower, it's not quite as strong.
Mm-hmm.
But also you've got strategies to make sure that you don't overheat. They use a term called purging. So you can put one of the windows in, say, the top bedroom on a catch, so it's just open slightly.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have another window open, say, on the other floor. Mm-hmm. Again, so that has what they call a cross ventilation effect. Mm-hmm. So you're actually, pulling air in and around the building. But ultimately, if you think about the building as a flask, so that even when it's hot outside, it stays cool inside. So if you keep it warm in the winter, then it stays warm. If it's cool in the summer, it stays cool. So think about it in that way. You've got that flask. But overheating is something that can happen. But you have strategies like using a purge system with the windows. Or sometimes people get a bit overawed by the, shall we say, the signs of it. You can just open your windows and doors if you want to. I personally would do that. I would be a bit more strategic about it. So in other countries where it's really hot, it'll be different. Obviously, in the UK, they already have the doors and windows blocked up for strong summer heat. Like in Spain and things like that. So,
with like shuttered windows and so on.
Yeah, that's it. So you can do a similar sort of thing, or just use blinds. So if it is really hot, you can just put blinds down and just avoid it from getting really hot. But once you get to know your house, you'll kind of monitor it.
Yeah,
you get to know what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned retrofitting, and like I know with the heat waves, like people have been talking since about the poor ventilation in a lot of UK housing stock because they're not, no house has been really built in this country for 35 plus temperatures because we build for the cold and the rain generally. And that with the retrofitting, there's a lot of, they've talked about with a lot of public spaces like hospitals and large public buildings, the key, the what's the word I'm looking for, but how necessary it is to have really good ventilation for those to keep the air moving and to keep those buildings cool so that, you're not using all your electricity and then it's breaking because you're trying so hard to cool the building. So, yeah, I mean, is that somewhere that, retrofit into Passive House standards could help as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once again, it is going to be simple things though as well that you do to complement the design, like the brise-soleils, like using a blind, like the purging, these sorts of things. I suppose you have to just have a little bit of understanding about how to do these things, be a little bit strategic about it, because I know what it can be like sometimes where you think, oh, I don't want to have to think about all these things. I just, it's just a house. Just leave it. If you sort of understand it and take a little bit of time to understand it, it's not that difficult to do. Just think on just a bit of forward planning. I think with the heat wave and being affected so much, I think that'll drive people to think about it.
Well, I mean, the sort of expectation that people can't learn something that's necessary. I mean, people learn to drive. That's a skill that takes time. It literally takes hours to learn. So yeah, and you said about education and awareness raising before. I mean, I think along with that, we do need to educate people. Like, for example, I think I've used this on the recording before, but they did in London. They got all these new buses when I was down there a few years ago, and they were all air conditioned. And then everyone was opening the windows on the buses. And it's like, well, it's not going to cool the whole of London, is it? So it's like it would work if you closed the windows and didn't let all the cooling out. But then that's also extra carbon that's being used to run those AC units from the bus. So it's like something that's there to cool the passengers is just being used to create more carbon. So yeah, there is a matter of educating the public at large as well, of just how to survive those high temperatures, of like what to do. We all have these sort of things that we develop ourselves of, this is what I do best to keep cool, but there is knowledge of what the best thing is to do, and that needs to be sort of more widespread.
Definitely. I think we're driven by necessity, aren't we? So when you have to drive because you want a job, when you have to keep your house cool because it's getting hot, you learn how to do it.
Yeah, and to do it cheaply, with prices sort of surging and going all over the place, people need that consistency and need to know that I can invest in this. This is going to save me money over the long term, right?
Yeah, and you're touching there on fuel poverty, and rising energy prices. This is one of the reasons why I think as a team we're so passionate as well, because we don't see a real need to be having to, you do spend a little bit of money on a basic heating system, but if you're strategic and you manage your house well, you build much less, very small, with a passive house design. It just beats me that we are doing this nationally. Everybody is being, I'm going to use the word forced into building like this. I think the fact that we're now driven to be self-sustaining because of these rising energy prices and the Russia-Ukraine war, I think that might help really drive some change. Necessity by demand. We have to. So I've got my fingers and toes crossed, and if I get a phone call from member of parliament for me to come and talk to about Passive Haus, they'll happily do so. I've had a request to speak and sort of be involved in the Green Skills Task Force, for example, with Tracy Brabin. Just sharing what it is, how important it is that we do get the education out there if we're going to meet these 1,000 green skill jobs that she's looking to promote.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go into my questions now. So I want to take you back. You kind of touched on it, but I want to sort of I want to ask about how you got into it. For myself, with Passive Haus, I think I've been aware of Passive Haus since about 2010 or something, for a good while. And I've, not seen it happening. And I was very surprised to find it sort of like going on in Leeds. I know that people have sort of trained and studied it before, but yeah. So how did you get into it? And then we might go a little bit into how your actual retrofit is going at the moment as well. But how did you get into it?
Yeah, so truth be known, I didn't actually even know what Passive Haus was. And my business partner went out to Germany. He went to a Passive Haus conference. I'm trying to think on time frames.
Yeah, I was just going to say, whenabouts was this?
That was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe. Yeah, probably more like 7. And Dave would be able to clarify that. And when Dave, he took the initiative, he went out and did it, did consult with me. Typical Dave, didn't consult with me, he went out and came back and sold it to me.
Yeah.
I jumped on board straight away, and it's been a steep learning curve. And yeah, I mean, I've got the bug. I've got the Passive House bug. I really do believe in what we're doing, and I've seen a real interest in the people that are involved in this community. I think I did a talk in York, and I shared a graph, and so Passive House now is slowly but surely, it's like a hairpin. Like the adoption of it, it's really steep. Like just a few at one point, and then now it's really taking off. I think I really do see that this will take off. I do believe in that. So yeah, it's been exciting, and since I've got the bug, yeah, it's a bit of a non-stop commitment. I think my wife would probably be quite happy for but she supports me. She supports me.
So did you pivot an already existing business, or was it, you had to start up a new business? Did you have to go and be like, I've got to do loads of qualifications now? Like, what was your journey into it? Was it just like, oh, I now know this is what we should be focused on, and then you learn a bunch of tips of how to improve various things? Like, how quickly did you get up to speed?
Yeah. So we started out doing traditional development, so traditional construction. And so then once we understood Passive House, we started to look into it and research and look at different options and ways of achieving Passive House. And so we eventually ended up working with a company called BT Passive. They have a patented system. So we worked with them for our first project, and then now what we're doing is we're developing our own system using, should we say, our system. I'm not trying to pass it off as our system, but we're not using a patented trademark system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're having to spend quite a lot of money on the patent. So what we did is we did really a bit like what we've always done, which is sort of role model success. So we worked with somebody who's already got the experience, let them do it, let them guide us, and we went on a steep learning curve through that.
Yeah.
Should we say a case study, and then we went on to take those lessons and develop our. So we, with that system, we won the best small scale development award in Yorkshire, which was a bit of a privilege to do. Nice to be recognised.
What year was that?
So that would have been last year we won that. Yeah. And it was, so we had like I said, we have had quite a lot of support for what we're doing, even if it's just emotional support. We haven't financially, it's all been out of our own pocket, and we've raised some private investment as well. But Sharon Dale, she's based at the Yorkshire Post. I remember she got in touch with me and she said, why don't you apply for this Best Small Scale Development in Yorkshire Award? And if it hadn't been for Sharon, I might not have done that. So, and then we got recognised. So it was nice because I remember my speech was, they asked me up to get my award, and I said, can I say something? The guy, he was quite funny chap. He said, Kev wants to talk. So my talk was somewhere along the lines of Purehaus have declared war on climate change, and that was to a room of probably 500 property professionals. Just to be able to say that in front of that audience, it's the start of something. It's that something. People are starting to listen, and that was definitely a proud moment for us as a company. And that was good. And then another milestone for us is setting up what we call the Zero Carbon Workshop. Once again, that has created quite a lot of interest.
There's a huge appetite out there, isn't there?
There is, but no one's doing it.
Yeah,
that's not nobody. Sorry,
people are doing it, but you're not seeing it as much as, because they're still trying to sell oil to us. They're still like, oh no, we're going to spend more money on this oil. It's like, it's done.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think people are starting to have interest in Passive House. It is happening, but we are early adopters, and yeah, I can see there's more and more logic moving towards it. And the zero carbon workshop we set up, that did get interest, and then we call ourselves the Purehaus School of Excellence. Going into we've been at Leeds College of Building, so I've been working with Leeds College of Building since back in 2019. So we got asked to speak at the Future of Housing. So that will have been around 2019 when we're just starting on site for our first development, for Passive Haus development. And I was sat on stage next to Derek Whitehead, who's the former principal of Leeds College of Building. Is it not Purples? Urban Splash, who have just gone. Or they just shut down one of their factories. I don't know. They might not have gone out of business, but
I heard the name before. I've heard of them.
And I think I was sat with, or it might have been Barrett's or one of the major builders. So I was sat on the stage with them talking about Passive Haus. You know, so it has attracted attention. What we're doing, people do want to talk about it. Not tons of people are really investing in it. I think some people are just thinking, well, I'll just sit back and keep doing what I'm doing until government regulation comes in, because they're making good profit out of what they're doing.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, in terms of like you sort of cost comparisons and your profit margins, like, I mean, you can't cut corners. So like, is that going to, you know, is it making it more expensive? Is it making it more of a luxury item? Like, is it something that you can kind of sustain with supply problems? Like, do you have to get all your supplies from further afield, or are they more locally? Like, is that part of it? Like, what are those sort of issues like for you?
Yeah, we've been okay. I mean, we're sourcing our windows from Norway. It's Nordan that we're working with. So that's a long way away. So it's not ideal. You know, in an ideal world, we'd have our own supply chain in Yorkshire or in Leeds, even better. Because it does all count in your cradle to grave calculation. So I'll explain what the cradle to grave calculation is. So basically, the cradle to grave calculation is the amount of CO2 emissions that you emit per meter squared for the life cycle of the product. So if you do get your windows made in Leeds and delivered to a site in Leeds, it'll be much smaller than if you get Norway delivered to Leeds. So the typical build is 1,800 CO2 emissions per meter squared. So our development in Oakenshaw, that was 250 kilograms of CO2 meters per meter squared. So that's the future. This is what we need to do. And there are products developing all the time. Timber is tried and true, but we need to move away from bricks and concrete as much as we can. Metal fabrication, you know, things like that. They have a very high cradle to grave calculation, along with concrete. Concrete's really bad. I didn't realize how much.
Yeah,
concrete's really bad.
Yeah, I did an interview with the guy who's got a PhD on concrete. It's not out yet, but it's coming. And yeah, fascinating stuff. But like the industry's doing a lot on that to try and reduce it down. But I think it's one of those things. It's just like, if you're making concrete and cement, you've just got to make loads of carbon. Like, it can't really be done otherwise. So yeah, so cost wise, sorry, go on.
Yeah. So on the concrete and the PhD on concrete, you know, we are looking to set up what are called knowledge transfer partnerships, where people come in with us. And so we're exploring, I won't go into detail, but we're exploring internal wall panel, which basically comes from barriers. I'll just leave it there. So an internal retrofit system that overcomes some barriers. That's what we're potentially going to be doing as a knowledge transfer partnership. So it's really important we get the academic input as well, you know, and we have, you know, people in the industry also working with people in academia. I think it's really important.
Yeah. So it's not a fixed standard then. It's like, as we learn more, we can raise that standard and it can go higher.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So there's a bit of a scale, and they call them biomaterials. So there's certain things like hemp that they basically are a positive. So they take carbon emissions.
Carbon sponges, yeah.
Take the carbon sponges.
Yeah.
So, it's not commercial. I don't want to shoot me down. I don't think it's as commercially viable, because the barrier that you've got is your lenders. Your lenders might not lend on a house that's built out of hemp. Some lenders will. Some lenders will, but you're narrowing your market down. So if, say, for example, yourself, Simon, you decided that you're going to build a house out of a hemp block, I'm sure you could go away and you can find out enough information. You could, if you were really committed to it, you'd make it work.
Yeah, isn't the Lilac building built from hempcrete? Or
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. I think that is right. Yeah. So, you would be able to go out and do it yourself, but you might have an issue if you were going to sell your house. Ecological Building Society, them guys have been great for us. So I do think Ecological Building Society would look at something like that, providing they got the approvals that are needed. But there is a little bit of a risk still, because it's uncharted territory. But once again, people who are doing hemp block would challenge me, and they would say, no, it's not. You can do it. So that's good. And this is part of why we want to engage in a conversation with people.
Yeah.
Talking about things.
Yeah.
Because if we had, we like this idea of what we call a knowledge center. So the people come and share information, so if you have somebody who's got experience in hemp block, then they come and they share it with us. We have a team of people who want to learn, and we just sit and listen. Because that's what it's all about, is sharing the information. If you're getting good practice, this is why the industry is not improving quite like it could, is because industry best practice is kind of kept indoors. People don't want to share it. They want to keep it all indoors. So obviously we need to have a business model to make it so that people do want to open the doors. But I think the more we start sharing and collaborating and talking, the better for the industry, because we can progress faster that way.
And I think, you sales as well, I think the retrofitting is really important, because obviously, as you say, it's no good just building all of that, because the carbon release is like, oh, we'll knock everything down and just rebuild it all in one go. It would just be, they're lethal. So yeah, so being able to retrofit, but then if you've got a brand like Passive Haus, that could be something of, if I was thinking, where do I buy a greenhouse? I don't know if there's a particular estate agent that specializes in it, or if it's just I look around all the estate agents, or how many of them there are. And I would think a lot of the time people, if they want to do that, if they're in a position to buy and they want it to be a greenhouse, not a greenhouse, but a greenhouse, they're going to look to sort of build, if they can, more looking for land and looking to build for themselves, rather than, I suppose a few people will look to retrofit and try and get whatever, but maybe not all of them have heard of Passive Haus. So I'll let you respond to all of that verbiage.
I think a green estate agency, it would be a good thing. And then you would also, one of the issues that we've got is greenwashing, and that's why we're behind institutes like the Passive Haus Institute. Is because it avoids it, it stops it. Cradle to grave calculation, it stops greenwashing. It's a factual thing. There might be an ironing out process that needs to take place in collecting data and making sure the data is accurate. But once again, this is the collaboration side of things. So if I can share information, then you might want to cross-examine it, and you might come back to it and say, actually, Kev, you said this, but I've looked at this and it's not quite what you think it is. So it's really important, because it is a complex topic, and the more minds that are working on this is the better. Having said that, it needs to be regulated, it needs to be carefully conducted. And I think this is where maybe the commercial interest of people may may stop them from doing that, you know. So we need to find a way to get a commercial, make it commercialized so that we can all start engaging and sharing. And you know, at the moment it's very early doors, isn't it, for Passive Haus? And I shared a fact. It was only 8 houses were Passive Haus certified last year. Now, did you know that we're building about 750 homes a day at the moment? So if you want to,
it's a big leap from 8, isn't it?
yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. So you're going to have. There are different standards, and I had a conversation with Association for Environmentally Conscious Buildings, Duncan is called. So he was talking about the different standards. So you have Passive Haus, you have LETI, you have AECB, and then there's the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So if we say that Passive Haus is the best standard, and then it slightly goes up, and the quality just slightly decreases, but it's still good that we're having people engaged and talking. So you don't want to alienate people, but our best practice would be Passive Haus. You know, we would champion that.
Yeah.
However, you need more people to start taking action.
Yeah.
If we alienate everybody and say, "Oh well, you're not meeting Passive Haus, so sorry, if you know you're not welcome to the table," people are going to say, "Well, no, it doesn't make any sense. I'm not doing that."
Yeah.
So you're just going to get everyone's back up.
Yeah. And then the thing is, with like a lot of it does need, you know, it needs investment, it needs subsidies, it needs market like buyer, which despite, you know, some people saying that things don't need to be interfered with, the reality is that it's being interfered with every day. I mean, the amount that we subsidize like the fossil fuel industry already every day, and even with renewables, there's subsidies going into that. And like, you know, the government makes markets. And if you're wanting to, like, we need the regulation.
No more than me on that one. Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I'm interested to hear more about that. But yeah, I can imagine that is the case.
So it's like, yeah, if they're going to regulate, then you want the highest standard possible. You don't want to sort of meet it in the middle, and then ideally you want to be surpassing that standard and going higher, because you know that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, massively. I agree. I'm very pro of that.
Yeah. So I'd kind of go a bit further back into how you sort of got into the development itself, like the development side and sort of setting up your business. But I've got quite a lot of stuff on people setting up their businesses. So I want to crack on with questions, and maybe other stuff will come up as we go through.
Yeah, it's time. Yeah.
So I'm going to go into the COVID question now. So I want to take you back to sort of, well, if you just think of when you first became aware of COVID, think of like going into lockdown, and just take us through that sort of journey. Like, were you working more? Were you working less? Did you think, oh God, this is the end of the business, we won't be able to do anything now? Like, were you furloughing people? Were you furloughed yourself? Could you do that? Or were you straight into, right, we're key workers, we need to be working on stuff? So how did it go, and how has COVID changed your work?
Yeah, a few really important things happened for us in COVID. So number one, well, it was my son's birthday, so he was 2 when COVID lockdown happened. So like everybody in England, we was all in despair, and you know, we had 2 kids at home. So you know, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So yeah, it was tough. It was tough. However, we did come through it, and I'd say as a company, we definitely grew. So I always remember we were setting up a marketing campaign, and the chap who was setting up the marketing campaign, he said to me, "So we'll just put it on pause then. You know, see, it's just happened, COVID." And I said, "No chance. We send it live." And so he said live, and that is from that marketing campaign. We have now got our next development joint venture, which basically is a 20 homes that we're building. So we pressed on. We had another really significant thing happen to us, which was our lenders just pulled out. They just said, no, we're not lending, boom, see you later. So we had guys on site, we'd done this future of housing talk, we'd not actually started building yet, but we'd just planned and we'd put the design in and such like. So we had to overcome all that. There were a couple of issues with our workforce, but we kept going. We managed to get through it. Yeah, we managed to get a legal contract in place for the joint venture that we're doing now, which is on our next development of 20 homes. We managed to build the houses. We actually attracted a better lender, so Ecological Building Society.
Yeah.
Better lender.
It's more in line with what you're doing.
Totally more in line. And they've been very supportive. And to be fair, if it wasn't for the help of Ecological Building Society, they're definitely a linchpin for us in terms of getting us to where we are. They really helped us. They helped us set up the Zero Carbon Workshop as well. We had obviously private investment, people helping us. So, socially, I think people are behind what we're doing. And we have had benefits from that we're grateful for. And it's been so we turned a difficult situation and made it work for us. But COVID did have a massive effect on everybody, didn't it? In terms of like the social side of it, and for me personally, so some things that I used to do in my day-to-day life, I don't do that anymore. I've changed my life massively, and I'm happy for it. I'm glad that I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think everybody maybe change their routine just a little bit. I'm sure you can relate to that as well, Simon.
Yeah, well, what I'm suffering from at the moment is I'm doing far more than I want to be doing, and it's on stuff that I don't want to be spending that time on. I've gone from being really time rich to being like not having any time, but not doing it, not spending the time on the things that I want to do. So it's an odd situation in that regard. And for me as well, like part of my thing now is to work less, because from my own carbon production point of view, and just, I think there's so much focus on production and this sort of like go out and work more and work more. It's like, no, work less, because a lot of that time can be wasted time. I mean, it depends what you're doing, of course. But yeah, I was going to ask, so your sort of work-life balance, are you a bit of a workaholic? Can you separate work and life quite easily? Did lockdown sort of make you slow down? But obviously you're in a company where you want to grow and you want to get more and more done and you want to evangelize. So like, how do you sort it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's great that people do what they feel comfortable with. And so I'm not pro anything really, but I'm just pro myself. And so like the way that I look at it, I think, if you can make good impacts and you can do a good job, get out there and do it. And, I am really committed to that. It's not just go and earn money for earning money, or, there's a bigger cause for me. And I think that's, I think if anything, I've doubled down on it. I've doubled down on my commitment and my focus on what I'm doing. I do want to be strategic about it, but that's different. I'm strategic about how I'm growing, but I am growing and I am putting a lot of effort and time into our business. And that's it. It's important. It's important for me, and it's important for our community, and it's important, for the country as a whole. The more people that we've got doing this, the better. It's a good thing. However, what I would say is, if your situation is that you don't feel like that's the right thing for you, then I think that people should do what they feel passionate about. So I'm very much one of these people who is do what you want to do, passionate about. Obviously you have to take into account the rest of society and make sure that you're not just throwing litter on the ground and doing things illegal, but do what you want to do, and live the life that you want to live. It's important.
I mean, I do think there are people in society that are sort of doers, and I think other people would do if they were given the chance to sort of, maybe have the pressure taken off a little bit and sort of given time to think. So one of the other things that I've kind of discussed is, like with everything that happened with COVID, that was a big thing. That was a big kind of traumatic change. But then we just moved from like one crisis into the next crisis, and they just come so fast that it's like you don't have time to kind of adjust. Like having a mission, having something that you're working towards, that's got to be quite good to be like, well, and as you've already experienced with the sort of like everything, all our money's gone, our investors gone, you've just got to be like, well, I've got to keep going. Something will turn up. So, yeah.
Yeah. I suppose really what you want to be doing, this is why some people would almost say, well, it's a bit strange, but you almost want to be looking for a bigger crisis. Like, if you've got a crisis and you've got a challenge in your hands now, push yourself, work hard, and get ready for the next challenge, and make sure the next challenge is bigger for you, because that's what you're building muscle. So use that muscle instead of bowing out and doing less than you're capable of. Actually, as you're growing, as you're developing, do more, do better. But there's a fine balance here. So, you could easily end up getting yourself into a place where you're overwhelmed, or, my approach is not everyone's approach.
I mean, what's the actual work that you enjoy from it? Is it the being on site? Is it the project management? Is it like, do you enjoy making the phone calls? Do you enjoy the whole drama of it? Of like, I like filling in the paperwork, and then I like being on site, and I like working with people. Like, what are the joys of it for you? I mean, obviously the evangelizing of what you're selling, but like the day to day, what are things that what gets you up in the morning, makes you do it, other than the mission?
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm going to say I almost forget the sort of day-to-dayness of it. I focus on just the vision. That's what gets me up.
Yeah, you're just like, this is what I need to do today to work towards this ultimate goal.
Exactly. So if it's responding to emails, if it's talking to people who maybe I'm finding it difficult to have a conversation with a certain person, but I'm going to make it happen because I have to make it happen. It's really important, So it goes beyond. It goes beyond myself. It's not really what I want to do. It's what I need to do, and therefore get it done. If I'm serious about what commitments I'm making, then I need to demonstrate that. But on that same token, I'm not being idealistic and pretending that there aren't barriers. There will be barriers, and there will be things that slow me down. But I can do the best that I can with what I've got.
I really like that line that you said of like what I need to do for the day. I think that's a really good way of defining sort of work, because part of the thing that I'm kind of circling around looking at is, like what is work? What makes a thing work? Is it just getting paid for it? Like, is volunteering work, or is it the fact that it's something that you have to do? Like, I quite like that definition of it.
Yeah, I believe that we're built to work. And I think that we're happiest when we're working. But this is my opinion, so I'm not saying everyone's the same. That for me is I'm at my happiest when I'm making progress. I'm doing something that I want to do, and I can imagine that I'm not saying that I'll come out of this industry, but if I were to come out of this industry, I can imagine that I'd still be the same. I'd just funnel that energy into something that I'm passionate about. Because I've heard people say things like, "Oh, I can't find my passion," or look, passion is not something that you find. Passion is something that you create by the energy that you put into it. That's the way that I see it. So it's a conscious decision, because every single day you get up out of bed, your stomach might not be feeling right, or you might have a headache, or your kids are crying in the background or whatever. There's always going to be something that stops you or wants to slow you down. And that's reality, isn't it?
But then you have to stop yourself as well. Like, you do have to take breaks, and you do have to walk away from things, and there are benefits from, like, if you've been working on something, especially if it's in your head a lot, and you kind of all of this kind of stress, and then you step away from it, you know, you have a proper break, and then it's like everything slots into place, and then you come back and you're like, right, I've cracked it now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to what I was saying before about it. There is still a strategy to it.
Yeah.
Just because I'm committed to what I'm doing, don't mean that I'm stupid, because I do realize if I'm not being productive, then something has to happen.
Yeah. And if you're not healthy, then nothing can happen either. So, you know, you have to keep yourself sort of.
That's your foundation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's your foundation. So because people who know me best will know how committed I am to my health, you know, getting to bed, sleeping right, you know, they come first. They come first for me. That's not even negotiable. If someone wanted me to meet them and do, like, some people will do, you know, going out and having beers, and they'll do business networking like that. That's for me. You know, I'm in bed at a good time. I'm up early. I'm looking after my body. I'm looking after my health, making sure I get my 8 hours sleep. All the boring, mundane stuff. When it comes back to what we were saying earlier, do I go to bed? And make sure I get my sleep because I like it, or is it because it's a requirement? It's a requirement, you know. Like, you know, kids, you know, they get excited, don't they? They'd happily not go to bed until they've fallen asleep on the couch.
And they wouldn't realize over time either. That's why you come in as an instructor of like, I know you think this is a good idea, but it's not a good idea. You'll feel really bad. You'll be really grumpy. And I know you don't believe me when I say that to you. And even when you experience it, you still won't believe me because you won't remember, because you just want to stay up.
Exactly. So yeah, you have to be the boring parent who says, come on, bedtime, get yourself to sleep. You've got a big day tomorrow. You know,
it's your job. You're domesticating humans, you know, like you're housebreaking them.
Excellent. That's it. Yeah. I can only imagine. So I'm 40. In fact, I'm 41 this month. So you know, you in your wisdom, yeah, you start to value certain. I value very basic things. You know, going to bed healthy. You know, have a good 8 hours sleep, being able to look after your body, spend time with your family, just basic stuff. I don't need a lot. Listen, I want to take over the world so I can fill my pockets with loads of money. Like, that's not what I'm about. You know, I don't need an awful lot. You know, like, kind of ties in a little bit with what you're saying. I think people, and I totally am, I'm on the same page as you 100%. People are massively consumer driven, and I really don't like that. Also, I drive a little Polo, and you know, I probably would have thought about investing in an electric car, but the reality is, if I sell that car, someone else is going to use it anyway. So I may as well make the most of that car.
Yeah, like end of life.
End of life it, then buy one. And look after it. So yeah, I don't need an awful lot. I'm not into fast cars, fancy holidays, and you know, fancy clothes or anything like that. You know, just basic stuff for me. Really,
I just want to replace all the world's housing with good carbon neutral buildings.
Massively. And I do believe that, you know, small people can make a big difference, you know, in the community. So I don't know whether you've seen is it called the Innovation Curve by Simon Sinek? So basically you have your early adopters, your innovators, your early adopters, then you have a gap, and then you have your first mass market, and then your late mass market, and then you have your laggards. And so I believe we're kind of getting to that point now where we've got a gap, and we're going to get the, you know, not early adopters, the mass market early adopters. We're not that far away.
Yeah.
You know? And part of my confidence and drive comes from the fact that I've listened to the people in my team and about how much work they've put in the past. And then, like I say, I almost feel a little bit guilty because we've talked about how long I've been in this business, but I've seen the amount of effort that people were putting in 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And now I know that people are listening.
Yeah.
So that fills me with confidence, and sort of fuels me.
Yeah. I mean, even though there's a lot of pushback, I think like now is the time, like green industries, and we can, whatever greenwash arguments and whatever about that, but like a lot of this investment, like now is the time for it more than any other time. Like there's so much sort of like, even with, I mean, for all that we can criticize various sorts of bits of legislation, I mean, the US has done something that's actually quite effective. They are investing. So even there, it's kind of
just talk to that, because I seen something on that briefly that a bill's been passed in US.
So it's a big investment bill, but as the other commentators have said, if the fossil fuel industry are celebrating it, it's not obviously the best kind of legislation that we want, but there is a large amount of money that's going into renewable investment and so on. I think there's stuff with infrastructure building as well. I haven't followed it too much because I try not to use news too much these days.
Yeah, no, I don't watch news. I don't watch news, and this is why I'm asking you the question. Obviously, I'll see bullet points occasionally, because you can't get away from it all the time. But one of the things that I've found in practice, speaking with people like within sort of regional government positions, is I see that they don't actually understand the difference between renewable and I'm going to say passive house, fabric first.
They're completely ecologically illiterate.
That's right. Yeah, and then you hear, because I seen this, you hear Boris Johnson talking about buying the kettle for £20. It's a very, very low level of knowledge for the guys at the top. I'm going to say I'm learning every day. I'm on a steep learning curve. I do not know everything, but what I do know is that they are very limited in their knowledge. So yeah, we need to get key influencers, people like Boris Johnson, to really understand what we're talking about. So I don't think Boris Johnson's a good talking point, is it?
Well, I mean, he's finally gone now, so it's Liz Truss that we need to worry about now. So
you knew that, but that's recent. So Liz Truss.
Yes, the announcement was today, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's
our new prime minister now. Yes.
Liz Truss. Okay.
Yeah. What was I going to say there? Oh yeah. So I would normally go into the Brexit question after the COVID question, but I'm going to go straight into the social media question here, because I think, given what we've just been talking about and the whole sort of education side, now obviously you will need to have a good social media game for what you're doing. You have a good thing to sort of create content around. But for yourself, how much time do you have to spend on social media? And is the time that you spend on social media, do you really see the value from that? Like, like, I definitely have to do social media because it's so valuable and I can see the results of that? Or do you kind of like create some content, it goes out into the ether and you've no idea if that time was well spent?
Yeah, it's difficult to always monitor how effective things are. However, I think our landing page for the land acquisition, that was Instagram. So we do use social media with success. At the moment, we're not investing that much money and time into it, but I definitely do think that there's a lot of benefit that can be had there. So as a small business owner, I'm doing as much as I can in lots of different areas. However, if I had a perfect setup, I would have someone dedicated to social media, because I believe we are now in the attention economy. So, if you can get people's attention and you can, get their interest for a period of time, you're doing something good there. So provide engaging content and provide education.
I mean, so it helped you making connections and so on. I mean, obviously in your field, your industry, I mean, I would imagine you're still going to need to use a lot of subcontractors. You're still going to need to find a lot of suppliers. You need to make those connections and know who the people are. And then you're going to need specialist equipment as well. So
definitely. Yeah, definitely. We wouldn't be having this conversation now if it weren't for Duncan from PCB.
yeah.
So, there are conversations that I have, and I want to say daily, like productive conversations that I have with people that you can meet through social media. So yeah, I definitely see a place in it, and yeah, I think if anything, I'd like to spend more time doing it.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you enjoy the kind of media side of it? Like, are you happy sort of being on camera and doing recordings like this? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm comfortable talking. I'm comfortable talking about what I do, and I think we need to get talking, don't we? Yeah, we need to get talking. So yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and I think these days, and it's the shift that we're going to another conversation, but it's the shift that we're going into, the technology shift. The talk about Meta, where people are going to be putting a headset on and talking through headsets, and so the good thing about Zoom and things like that, I can have a conversation with someone who's down in London,
or the other side of the world.
Yeah, or the other side of the world, and it's just a heartbeat. So it's not even a big problem. So it means that you've got access to more people, and that's, in my opinion, always going to be a good thing if you're wanting to champion something.
Okay, so let's talk Brexit then. Let's talk suppliers. So my question around Brexit is, since we have Brexited, have you noticed any change in your work, either for the better, for the worse, or has there been no change?
I won't say it's been a really substantial effect, but I suppose the benefit is you've had I've had conversations with people in China, for example, about supplying us windows. We never progressed. It didn't make sense for us to work with them, but that was a conversation that we had. And it might not have been a conversation that we had before.
Yeah, and it might have put Passive Haus on their radar, potentially.
Yeah. No, it's on their radar. Yeah, absolutely. Because that's part of the reason we had the conversation. So, yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. But I think that's partly me being the type of person that I am. So if we'd have stayed in, I'd have probably said that it hadn't really affected me.
I haven't noticed. Price has not gone up for anything, or has there been any difficulties getting hold of stuff? And now that's kind of that's more worldwide as well now.
I think that was just as much to do with COVID though as well. Yeah, we had a bit of a mad rush to get some stuff. But we did manage to get it. Some timber I-beams we were looking to get, and some LVL. We managed to get that. So yeah, that it hasn't affected us too much. That could be the famous last words. I might be phoning you next week, Simon, and saying, "Do you know what? I wish I'd never said that to you."
Let's hope not. Touch wood. So. Right, so that'll do us on Brexit. So I've done that. Let's do the change question. So my question on change is phrased this way. So if you could change anything about your work, so you've got total carte blanche here. It can be really wild and fantastic, or it can be very pragmatic. If you could change any three things about your work, what would they be?
Well, I suppose I'm going to say what most small businesses would say, and I'd change my bank balance, so that would be so that I can have more impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose the next one would be I'd change our ability to align with strategic partners. And I do think we're already moving towards that and doing quite well with it. However, that would be a massive tick box for me. Strategic partners, getting in with good people. Because I think that's one of the key things. They use the term human capital, or getting the right people on the bus. So important. So I read a book by a guy called Jim Collins called Good to Great. And he talks about getting the right people on the bus. First of all, you get the right people on the bus. Yeah. So if you get the wrong people on the bus, that's a problem.
Mm.
Then you put them in the right places.
Mm.
Yeah, and then obviously you have the same mission, and you want to drive towards the same goals. So I think we're doing that. We've got the right people on the bus. We've got a good mission. We've got we're all sat in the right place, and I think now it's about getting more people on the bus. So yeah, that would be what I'd say: is get more people on the bus and get more money in the bank account, and yeah, I think that'd do it for us.
I'll add a third one for you then. Passive House becoming a legal requirement.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, massively. And I think all that would happen. But that's just me being quite idealistic and super positive. I think if we had the right people on the bus, we had the right, bank balance so that we could affect it all. And again, got strategic partners, I think that would happen. I think we're not far off that tipping point. I really do.
So just sort of going back to social media, I mean, like, where would you want to be kind of pitching yourself? Where would you be your main? Would it be LinkedIn, or would it be Facebook, or would it be different things for different uses? Right.
But this is probably going to be my lack of knowledge, really. So we were successful with our campaign on Instagram. We had some successful campaigns on Facebook as well. At the moment, I'm putting a bit of time in on LinkedIn, but I think I would probably want a professional to guide me and navigate me even better.
Are you sort of in like industry trade magazines then? Like, where does your marketing go? Is it more sort of traditional print?
At the moment, we're not doing an awful lot of it.
Right.
We've had articles done with the Passive Haus Plus magazine. Articles done with the Yorkshire Post, Telegraph and Argus, and then obviously we've done our YouTube, and we've had our Facebook campaigns and LinkedIn, and then, for example, I'm doing it's the York Business Festival and the Green Skills Supply event. It's a 2-hour event that I'm gonna open on Passive Haus, and that'll be like I think it's a 20-minute talk. So that'll be construction professionals, maybe who are already in Passive Haus, but just they're in the construction game and they want to explore, and they probably would know a little bit about it. They just want to understand a bit more. So I'm going to say feet on the ground events as well. I think, I think do more of them feet on the ground events, and the whole course that we're doing. This will, I believe, get talking to the right sorts of people. The word. So we need to affect key influencers and do that in whichever way we can. We do need to be talking to people as well as doing our social media stuff. You can't be actually talking to people, can you?
Yeah. Do tell us a little bit more about the course. I mean, like, how far along are you with that? What's the sort of time frame for the course? Like, what sort of budget? Like, how is it? Is it all going to be remote? Is it hands-on? Like, yeah, tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, we've got a 10-week program. So you do 1 day a week for 10 weeks. So it's 10 days the course. So we do 6 days in the classroom and do 4 days in the workshop. And what we're doing is we're looking to train the trainer. So we're going to go in and we're going to teach first of all. But while we're preparing for the course, we're recording everything. The idea is that we almost go in and just play our recordings. We're there just to stimulate conversation. And the idea is that we train the trainers. So that we train people, take the material that we've produced for them to facilitate it, and get people to break out. So the saying is no involvement, no commitment. So when you've got people there, you give them some education, then you get them to go research things in groups. Down. All right, I want you to go. Your homework today is go home and look at penetrations in your house and how you might overcome those if you were going to do a retrofit. So now they're going back at the house and thinking, oh, where's all the airflow going to come in? And we've given them examples. So they're already knowing where they need to look. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit of educate and now go and do some group activity, do a bit of research. Then the idea is when we go to our zero carbon workshop, they actually build a small a small unit. So I'm not going to say a house, but some wall panels and put it up in a control setting, just so they get the concept. So they can apply some liquid membrane, they can apply some, some insulation, they can look at the seals on a window, and they can basically walk away from the course actually knowing how to do some stuff.
Yeah.
So,
it's a kind of, it's like a train of thought, like a way of thinking. It's training the mind as well to sort of, this is the way you have been trained, but now we're going to retrain you a little bit and think about these things as well.
That's it. And just letting them know as well that all the skills that they've got will come into play still.
Yeah. It's not like you have to throw everything out the window.
No, exactly. They're all transferable skills, whether you're a joiner, whether you're a bricklayer, whether you're an electrician or a plumber, all of the trades need to understand.
Yeah, you're upgrading your skill set.
That's it.
Yeah.
Just a compliment. That's all it is. It's just a compliment to the skills that you've already got. So if you're a roofer, we need roofers on board. We need electricians on board. We need plumbers on board. The more, the better.
Cool. I want to ask a little bit about with regs and so on and with Passive Haus. I mean, obviously, there are considerations of, like your cradle to grave kind of consideration, which potentially affects your material choices. But I want you to kind of, if someone's imagining that these have to be pokey, sort of miserable, like hair shirt establishments because they're having to be eco, like they're really kind of, like tiny houses and they're all a bit naff. Like, is that the reality? I mean, obviously you're going to say no straight away, but sort of like, if someone's thinking anything along those lines, I mean, what's the reality of a passive house? Is there, like, do room sizes vary? Is there a minimum size that it has to be? So it's kind of like, again, a high standard. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you could just imagine, barring the fact that the shape of the building, if it was a new build, would be slightly different. So a simple way of looking at it, for example, the little porches that jut out from the building with I'm going to call it a traditional. What that does is it creates more opportunities to lose air. So we simplified the form with a passive house. So, but in fact, as to your question, room size and such, like, no, you can have good, nice, spacious rooms. And in fact, what I would argue is that you're actually improving the living standards because the light, you're maximizing the light. So you're making it so that your spaces are more vibrant and more enjoyable. And so, yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. And the retrofit as well. I can speak from some experience in the sense that, for example, my wife, retrofitted our house. And once she actually realised that she was going to get new windows that looked nice and that all the external, building would look, she would say, nicer, and you're going to be able to remodel it a little bit. That was quite important to her, Nice new looking doors, nice new looking windows, nice and fresh on the outside.
It's no good if it saves you money and it looks awful.
You make it look really nice.
Yeah.
You make it look really nice. So, some of the planners, I say some of the planners, up and down the country, I think people are becoming more aware now of sustainability. So they'll probably be a bit more flexible with you. So what I did on my house was I was basically saying it's going to be the same, but the insulation will go a bit lower. So I've got a rendered house. So instead of having a splashback that's, say, that big, at the front it'll go into the floor, and then I'll have to create a splashback a little bit deeper. And then at the back, I've got drops down. So basically my insulation will drop down a bit lower. And you'll still see the splashback at the back because it slopes down. So, but generally, it looks pretty much the same. Just the levels, that's it. And then the windows, with the window, if you have what are called transients and mullions, which is a technical term. So the joins of the window,
Mm.
whether it's if you've got a small window or you've got a big window that's separated.
Mm-hmm.
What they're like the joins, they're called transients and mullions.
Mm-hmm.
So with the design of my retrofit, there'll be a lot less transients and mullions. So big open windows. So I personally, I don't think that's offensive. I think it looks nice.
Mm.
So, and I think once again, I think my wife, once she realised that,
Mm.
she was like, "Oh, they look quite stylish. I like those. I like those windows." So that was, a good thing. A good thing for her.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like with sort of making better choices, shall we say? There's a lot of kind of like, oh well, it has to be miserable, but it doesn't always have to be miserable. Like a lot of the time, it is stuff like doing, sitting and reading a book in daylight rather than running the TV or something. Simple things. It doesn't all have to be bad. Is my point. I'm going to do my UBI question. I think this is going to be quite short with you. So if there was a UBI, if there was a universal basic income, how would that affect your work? Would you still be doing what you're doing? If you would still be doing what you're doing, would you be doing it as much or doing it in a different way? How would a UBI change things for you?
Yeah. I know you touched on that. So universal basic income. For me, I can't understand a universal basic income. What I don't want to see is people in poverty. So I'm all for helping people to come out of poverty and making sure that people can afford to, live comfortably.
Buy houses.
Definitely. Yeah, I can't understand the idea, to be honest. I think it's a flawed. It's almost closer to socialism, isn't it? I think capitalism works. Meaning, you can come from like myself. You can come from Thorpe Edge, council estate. I'm going to say single parent kind of, because I did have two people in the house, but I'm going to call it a single parent household. Yeah, you can come from council estate and you can work hard and you can climb the ladder. You can do that. So I think that's a privilege that you've got in a capitalist society, and so you get rewarded if you work hard and you add value. So I think that's a good thing. I think it motivates people to create. A good example of, like, I would never want to trust the government with a full campaign of doing, innovating and such like that. Innovation always comes from small companies because they're really digging deep. When you go to like government level and bureaucracy and such, like, it just slows innovation down. So I am a big believer in capitalism, and a big believer in working to be able to achieve something for yourself. So that might be quite short for you, but
no. I mean, like, so. Sorry, I missed the last bit there.
I think you were expecting maybe my answer to be somewhere like that.
Not necessarily. I mean, like, it's an interesting one, the UBI, because some people are kind of like, I've never heard of it. Some people are like, yeah, I've heard of it and totally into it. I mean, it's another way of asking as well, like, if money was no object, would you still be doing the same thing? But as well with it, like, it's nice to get different answers.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, so I'll put it to you that way. Like, if money was no object, I mean, would you have ended up doing this? Or would you have just gone like, I'm going to just do football. I don't need to care about money. Like, how do you think that would have changed things if you didn't have to consider
That is a good question. That is a good question, because it really brings it to life for me. It's possible I would be doing this. So, and I believe what I'm doing is a good thing. I believe I'm adding value to people. So that would have been, in fact, that's a great example of what I'm saying. Really, yeah. It's socialism and just having everything provided for you is not. I don't think we're born like that. I don't think that's how. I don't think for someone to thrive, I don't think that's the best circumstance for now. That's if someone needs a support and they haven't got the ability to do what I'm talking about, then yeah, fine. I'm all for supporting people. I don't want to see people in poverty. I don't want to see people, struggling. If they've got bad health problems and they can't work, and at the time base, it's not a nice place for them to be, the way I see it. Not everyone thinks like me, so I'm sure there'll be some people who would. And this is the beauty of they call it constructive conflict. That's the beauty of having conversations. And so I think with good society, I think some people are quite scared. And myself, because I aim to be PC, might not always be, but people are always concerned about saying things that offend people. But is that right? Should we be able to have a bit of conflict and not just throw all our toys out of the pants and just start being volatile with each other? If you see things different, that's good.
Yeah, so and you need a difference of opinion anyway, because it's good to see all the eventualities. Because just someone who's been negative about something is not someone that's necessarily been like just cynical. Like, there's bad faith actors and there's good faith actors, but if you're acting in good faith when you're sort of being critical of something, then you're strengthening that particular issue. Because it's like, if there's a weakness and it's a valid weakness, then that can be resolved, that can be fixed. So it's like you need that variety of opinions. You need to sort of think. It's like have you ever seen the Edward de Bono sort of 6 hats?
No, I've not seen that.
Yeah. So it's one of these old kind of like management kind of things of like, so one particular hat is like the blue sky thinking sort of hat, and then one's the like more critical hat, and one's the pragmatic hat that's sort of like, well, here are the details and the nitty gritty of this and how we need to do it. And you need the full gamut of everyone and every way of thinking. I mean, this for being self-employed, of like, you have to do every role until you can get someone else to do it. And so you have to put a different hat on, like your marketing hat is different to your, like your production hat. So you have to think about these things in different ways.
Yeah, I think this is where like the term constructive conflict, and I follow Ray Dalio, so he calls it the principles. So how each independent person, so you have all the different personality types, but you have different positions and different sort of tendencies within communities. Like you said with the hats, I'm classed as a commander. I'm the one who kind of charges things. Look, I'm going to hold people accountable, whereas you're going to have different people who are more, for example, a coach, the one who kind of holds your hand a little bit and make you laugh and that sort of thing. But it's important to have all those different people, like my wife, she will slow me down and she will ask me some questions. And I recognize now, I'm going to say with maturity, but also studying, I recognize, I'm like, right, Claire's doing what Claire does. She's that personality type. And I know that it's quite painful for me to answer and give her the sort of details she wants. But I recognize the value in it. So I'm like, right, now this is a good opportunity for me because I can do what's not natural to me. But by doing that, I'm collaborating and I'm working better with people.
Yeah, well, again, it's another skill set, isn't it? And it's like, just because there's a lot of things that we don't want to know, and that we're not bothered about learning in life. Of like, well, I don't care. I don't need to know how to do that. But it's like, well, actually, you do, because this will help. So learning those other skill sets, so I come from like, I did a lot of work, and I'm going to come on to unions with you as well. So sort of, I was working in unions and working on like long-term education, and got a real bug for sort of lifelong learning and sort of continual study. And I think it's really valuable. And whether it's like organized study or not, like you said, you're learning all the time, you learn every day, and that should be something that we're not afraid of. And schools can be very detrimental in that sense of putting people off learning, but like, you're always learning, you're always picking up new skills. Like you have to, whether you want to or not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's that for me is one of the benefits of life in general, and having the richness of life, because you're always learning, aren't you? And that, I enjoy that. Yeah, I enjoy, and that's why for me going to work and doing what I do, I know that I'm always going to be learning, whether it's articulating my point in the right way so that I can explain it properly to you, whether it's making sure that I get my numbers right when I'm sharing it with my accountant, or getting some details right on with the build side of things, getting me ordering, which project management. I'm constantly learning, and I like that. Yeah, that keeps me on my toes.
Yeah. And you're learning like which suppliers are best to use, which you have the best relationship with, like who are the best people, and how to be in different ways with different people and so on. So it's like, there's constantly stuff going on. Like you're always micro changing things and altering yourself, aren't you? So I want to ask briefly about unions before I start to wrap it up. So traditionally it was kind of a strong area for the unions in the building trade. I don't know what it's like these days, but have you had much dealings with unions as you've been doing this? Have they been constructive or combative? Like, what's your kind of relationship and experience with unions?
So I think I've got limited experience, so we start there. But why don't you just explain to me a little bit, what sort of trade unions might I, for example, come across? Because the way that I'm perceiving a trade union is it might be you had a dispute with work and that you went to trade union to get support. Is that right?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like, I suppose I guess because you're not, like if you were a massive, massive developer with like loads and loads of contracts, you're going to, I suppose, come across. And I know that, so a few years ago, there was an issue there was like a unofficial blacklist. I can't remember which sector it was. So there's sort of, like I say, I don't think the density is too massive now, but I mean, I suppose the main things are a kind of, it's about standards, I guess, is the question of like, so what are the kind of bread and butter issues, like the pay and conditions? Does Passive House give people better pay and conditions, on the side of your employers and your suppliers? Like, would they expect sort of better margins, or like, is it better or worse? Or like, do you have to cut more corners because your margins are lower because you've got to compete with this? So, I mean, just your response in that kind of area, I suppose.
Yeah. So the talk about the innovation curve. So when you first bring in innovative products to market, there's a cost. There's a cost to it. And I can give you a live example. So when we built our houses, we got a buyer straight away, like one of the first viewers. And this is what she said, I've been wanting a house like this for 15 years. She basically was prepared to move, not miles away, but she basically Wakefield. She was going to move to Bradford. Okay. But the valuer came, downvalued the property by £75,000. And that basically was one of the costs that we had to pick up because they didn't understand our product. So he valued it based on traditional. He didn't take into account the fact that the house, I mean, I could go back to him now and I could say, would you maybe increase the value on it now, given the fact we've got a fuel shortage? We've got rising energy costs. Do you think we factor that in now? But, part of that was lack of understanding. And then I'll give you another example. So the the planners, when we first of all put our scheme together for the development that we're going to do it's Leeds City Council, but it's Bradford postcode, just on the border near IKEA. So they basically didn't understand what we were doing. So we had to take time, educate them. And then that information didn't get passed down to people properly, and they still didn't understand. So we had to go back to them again. So we had to spend a lot but they did work with us. So this is an example of it becoming a bit more top down. So the government are making the right noises. And so there was a bit of support there. They did work with us, but we did have to really put quite a lot of time in getting hold of the right person. And I don't know if you've ever had to do that, but yeah, some of these people can be quite hard to get hold of.
Yeah, once you've got the name, it's like I've been chasing this person for however many weeks.
Yeah, literally at least a month.
Yeah. And then the one time they do ring you, it's like the time that you're unavailable. You're like, oh, for God's sake.
Yeah, but I'm not talking badly of people, because
no, it's just the way it goes, isn't it? With those things.
Yeah, but so there was a cost to it. Now, coming back to your question about can people, once they upskill, expect a better pay? In an ideal world, I would say yes, but actually making that happen and having the ability to do that, I could just say yes, but let's see how things develop. So we've been able to affect. Basically, we sold, just in the process of selling the final one, but we sold the houses in line with the premium that we expected to get.
Right, good.
So that was the result. And on the houses that we're building now, I believe that we will likewise will get a premium on the local area. So that can filter on to people. So yeah, in theory, I think people will be able to get better paid jobs, and it will improve and enhance their professionalism, the loyalty, both sides, because they get engaged in doing it to a new standard, and they start delivering on that standard, then they become more valuable. So yeah, they definitely become more valuable, and I'm sure the market will reward that in time. But it's not being. I mean, I've said to you in this podcast that we have had support, and but we haven't had a leg up off anybody financially.
But it's early days as well still, so it's not like there's loads of investor money just being thrown at you.
That's right. So everybody, when we speak to them, you must have found it really easy to get finance. And no, often. No, this is all really from our own sort of hard work and effort.
But you have to educate the entire market, and as much as that includes like planners and so on, it includes investors as well, and even consumers and like your buyers. Go on, sorry.
No, definitely 100%. But I think the rise in energy prices will drive people as well. I think that'll be, I'm going to say, carrot and stick. So the carrot is, we'll say, look, this is the right way to do it, and the stick is they don't want to pay energy prices. So that'll probably shift things a little bit. People are motivated by pain and pleasure.
Yeah.
I think the pain for some people will be a stronger driver.
I'm going to throw it over to you. So is there anything that we've not talked about that you want to sort of touch upon, or anything that you want to kind of go back to, or anything that you want to sort of notify people about? Now's your chance. So I'll pass it over to you.
I would just say, look, if you're interested in what it is that we've been talking about, building to a higher quality standard, building to a passive house standard, retrofitting to a passive house standard, get in touch. Maybe we can help you. So my personal email is kevin@purehaus.co.uk. So that's purehaus.co.uk. And I'll get back to you. And let's all see if we can do our part to changing the way homes are built in this country.
Okay. And I want to sort of we'll touch upon how your retrofit's going, because we've mentioned it a couple of times. So is this your first retrofit, or is it the first time you've already done them and you're just doing it for yourself now?
So as a team, we've done about 20 retrofits.
Okay.
So myself, project managing my own retrofit. This is the first one.
Yeah. Are you doing this one on your own, or have you brought a team in with you for it?
No, I will definitely be having people to help me and assist me with the labor side of it, but I will be overseeing details, and I will be making sure the quality is there. And I'm going to say, doing the stuff that it's quite painstakingly difficult, but it has to be done, you know. So it'll be air tightening and making sure that all the holes are blocked up and making sure that the MVHR tin is all laid out properly and all the connections and the joints are solid, and working with your suppliers and get sort of logistics, managing it all. So it's going to be quite an interesting challenge for me to retrofit my house when I've got 2 kids and an active lifestyle. To both me and my wife working from home, so not all the time working from home, but for the large part of it, certainly at the moment. So yeah,
Are you working from home and on your home?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, it'll be all encompassing. So when I want to take a step back, Simon, I might not be able to, so we'll have to find a different way of, bouncing back.
Okay, I know there's a question that we haven't covered, which listeners will be shouting out, but it's the most obvious one, and I think we kind of covered it anyway because it's a question about climate change. So the question is largely, what are you doing in your work to kind of anything for adaptation or awareness raising or, sort of impact reduction? I think you've just spent 2 hours talking about that.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose I think key things that we can do, I'm going to say leading by example, and that'll be through innovating, changing our products, developing our products, not getting comfortable with what we're doing, refining, getting better in all departments, whether that's getting better at communicating the message, whether it's getting better at delivering the product, whether it's getting better, having a better system to be able to meet the needs that we need to meet in terms of the built environment, because that's where I want to spend my time and become even more knowledgeable in. So yeah, that's going to be my focus.
Cool. One final question before I wrap it up. I'm just curious to know, in terms of like for the organization, for the business, are you just want to look at sort of like how much you're in-housing, how much you're out-housing? Like what are the sort of priorities for you? And in terms of, I suppose, your suppliers, and I suppose in terms of you, to some degree, your carbon footprint, to some degree, your expenses, but also the kind of condition of the people that you can employ and the kind of jobs that you can kind of create for people. What's your kind of balance? What's your agenda around that? Like, are you looking to sort of have as many people and be a tight-knit group of people, or are you focusing on just getting the work done, however is the most efficient way of doing it? I've not really got a question there, but do you kind of get what I'm trying to get at?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to measure twice, cut once, and meaning that we'll bring the right people in, and we won't rush. We won't just bring people in for the sake of it. We'll make sure that we're getting good quality staff, and that's going to be quite important. But I haven't discussed another really important person that's coming into the team, but he basically a commercial contractor, or he brings with himself a team, and he brings with himself the experience of managing teams, so that we can all focus on what we're really good at within our team. So once again, it's about getting the right people and then getting them sat in the right seats on the bus. And so he's very good at that. That's what his expertise is, the commercial side of it. And what we're bringing to him is the experience of doing something that's a bit more exciting. Instead of doing the bread and butter traditional build side of things, he's actually getting involved in a company that's doing something that he is interested in. Well, this is important, for us. What we don't want to do is just start bringing people in for the sake of bringing them in.
Yeah.
People in who really are interested in what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be really important for us moving forward. Get the right people on the bus and get them sat in the right place.
Thank you again to Kevin for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests, and thank you to you, Leeds, for being my subject. And of course, most of all, thank you to you, my dear listener. Come back on Friday to hear me talk to Sophie Greenwood from Ink and Bear. You can follow this show on Twitter at Working Hours 3 and on Instagram at Working Hours Pod Leeds. Use the hashtag Working Hours Pod Leeds to stay up to date on when new episodes are being released. DM me with your questions, or most importantly, get in touch if you'd like to be the guest on this show. It's not hard, it's not scary, and you know all the answers, and the whole internet's not going to attack you. Like, nobody's sharing this. Nobody's like, people are listening to it, but it's like, you're not going to be cancelled if you come on this show. Not yet, anyway. Please chuck in anything you can to help the show grow. Go to ko-fi.com/working hours and join me there for £1 a month. Or you can make a one-off donation of whatever amount. You can also go to patreon.com/working hours pod to support Working Hours, again from as little as £1 a month. So there, you can pay more if you want. Why not be super awesome and join both? There are live streams with me on the Patreon, and you can get access to the Working Hours Discord with a Ko-fi membership. There's not much happening on either of those fronts at the moment, but there's no reason to, so give me one. Go crazy. Spend on this show like there's no tomorrow. Why not? Your planet is burning. Your house is on fire. Your government are criminals. The oil industry are maniacs. And bankers are completely insane. We are losing everything. We are not acting like that. Do something new and something different. Remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to Working Hours. Work for peace and plan with kindness. Okay, that's me. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Please like Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/Western_Studios_Leeds and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Leeds, are you considering taking the plunge into podcasts or audio content? Then think Western Studios for support, advice and guidance on getting it made. At Western Studios, you work with a real-life learner who is actually in Leeds. Not a piece of software, not a course of articles or a series of live chats and video courses, but me, a person in physical place-based reality. If you want to work with me to make your podcast or any digital audio content in Leeds, whether it's for your own cause, your publicity campaigns, to promote your products, increase your sales, or just to create your own passion projects, then get in touch with me, Western Studios, now. Don't wade through vapid articles and videos and podcasts about how to make podcasts by disembodied virtual people on the web. Get on with making your podcast now, and then when it gets hard and expensive and it all goes wrong, which it will, then call Western Studios to make your podcast with you or even for you. Western Studios will take on your podcast's boring, time-consuming and painful admin, recording, editing, transcription, whatever. Tell me about your podcasting pain points and I can make it all better for you. I feel your pain. For a charge, I will share it. Remember, podcast work is work.